Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from Rouse IAS. Dear all, in our weekly series of mains question assignment from DNS, the question for today's assignment reads, what do you mean by central bank digital currency? Discuss as to how its introduction can have several advantages over the existing private cryptocurrencies. Now this is a 10-marker question to be addressed in 150 words. Now in the description of the video there is a link for the question assignment where you can participate in the discussion on the Rouse eLearn platform. Please find the link for the question which has been uploaded today as the mains weekly question. Now here are few things that you must follow. You can type the answer in the comment box or you can click the image and send your answers to us. All those who will send their answers by Saturday will get it evaluated and will receive feedback from Rouse IAS faculty. Now post your answers only in portrait mode. You should not post your answers in somebody else's answer or comments. Try to keep a tab on the time taken. Mention the time taken to write the answer at the bottom right hand side. You can also mention the city and the state from where you are posting this answer. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we will be taking up the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 25th February 2021. Now the articles to be discussed are reflected on your screen and the time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let's begin. Now the article in front of you appears on the page number 6 of the Hindu newspaper and it has been titled as the structural fragility of the Union Territories. Now since this article talks about the Union Territories, it falls under the mandate of GS paper 2 subsection Polity and the Constitution, wherein it talks about the function and responsibilities of the Union and the states, which also includes the Union Territories. Now as we all know, this article has been written in the background of recent turn of events in Puducherry, wherein the Congress-led government lost the vote of confidence after majority of its MLAs resigned, thereby reducing party's majority in the House abruptly. Now this has given rise to demand for president rule in the Union Territory of Puducherry. Now in this article, we'll talk about how are the Union Territories in India so structurally fragile? What are the reasons behind the structural fragility of the Union Territories of the Indian Federation? Now as we all know, India is a federal country wherein the ruling power is distributed among the central and the state governments. Now center has certain federal territories that are known as the Union Territories, the concept of which originated under the State Reorganization Act of 1956, wherein those territories who could not survive as a separate administrative unit because they were either too small to become independent, or they were too financially weak, or they were too different geographically and culturally, or they were politically unstable. In all these conditions, the Union government created a Union Territory such that it appointed an administrator with the name of governor that was appointed by the President of India to act as an administrator for these Union Territories. However, over the time there were two kinds of Union Territories that were created, one with legislature and one without legislature. Now, while Ladakh, Chandigarh, Dadar, Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu, Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar Islands have been created without legislature, Delhi, Puducherry and Jammu and Kashmir have been created with legislature. Now, Puducherry, Jammu Kashmir and Delhi have an elected legislature and a government due to the partial statehood that has been granted to them under special constitutional amendment that introduced Article 239 of the Constitution. Now it was felt by the administration of this territory that in order to meet the democratic aspiration of the people of this region, it was important to introduce legislature for these three territories, and hence for Delhi, Puducherry and Jammu and Kashmir, a legislature along with Council of Ministers was introduced. Now, while union territories without legislature have been able to function effectively under complete control of the union government, the same is not true for union territories with legislature. Now, the union territories with legislature that have certain power to govern themselves have been facing troubles with respect to the centre's interference in their functioning, as a result of which the central control in this area of the governance has not been very effective, and there has been conflicts that has been arising. For example, the recent Puducherry case. Further, in the past we have also seen similar cases happening in National Territory of Delhi, wherein the conflict arose between the elected Delhi government and the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. Now, as per the author, the prime reason behind these conflicts is the structural element. The structure with which the union territories with legislature have been created is flawed as per the author. And in this regard, he has presented certain points that reflect this concern. Now, let's have a look at these points. Now, while giving out his first argument, the author tries to bring out the concern related to the composition of the legislature of the Puducherry, as has been provided under the Article 239A of the Indian Constitution. Now, as you read the Constitution, Article 239A, you will see that the article suggests that creation of local legislature or council of ministers or both. Now, this is little absurd because in Indian constitutional scheme, legislature is a law-making body, while Council of Ministers brings in legislative proposal and policy. These policies are later passed by the law-making body, that is the legislature. On the contrary, this article is suggesting you can either create legislature or Council of Ministers, or if you wish you can create both. Now, this is a constitutional absurdity that has been highlighted by the author in this article. The next concern that author raises here is with respect to this other provision, wherein he suggests that Parliament may create a law for Union Territory of Pondicherry in terms of creating a body whether elected or partly nominated and partly elected. Now, with respect to this point, the author is raising concern. Now, as per the author, a legislature that is partly elected and partly nominated is absurd. For the government of the day can very easily make an amendment to the Government of Union Territory Act 1963 that has been created under the aegis of Article 239 to give effect to this constitutional provision and thereby increase the percentage of nominated legislature to as much as 50%. In this case, authors suggest this will no more be a representative democracy as India has been envisaged to be. Now, the next concern raised by the author is with respect to the method of these nominations. Now, as per the Government of Union Territory Act 1963, the legislature of Union Territory has 3 positions that are to be nominated. Now, recently the central government made nominations for these positions without consulting the Puducherry government, and thus this was challenged in the Supreme Court, wherein Supreme Court in the recent K. Lakshmi Narayan versus Union of India 2019 case upheld the union government stand and suggested that the union government is not required to consult the state government while nominating members to its legislative assembly. Further, even there were no qualifications that were provided for such nomination, and hence this leaves lot of space for arbitrary interference by the central government in the domain of the union government with legislature. And hence this is a great concern that has been raised by the author, that is hurting the structural integrity of the union territories with legislature in India. Now moving on to the last concern shared by the author, that is with respect to the administrator's power in the union territory. Now moving on to the last concern shared by the author, that is with respect to the administrator's power, that is the power that have been vested by the constitution in the lieutenant governors that are governing the duties with legislature. Now here the author suggests that the administrator have the right to disagree with the decision of the Council of Ministers of the UTs and refer them to the President for final decision. Now while this is a good practice in general times, as this ensures that central government is able to ensure an eye over the practices that are undertaking in the union territory. However, in cases where the central government belongs to a different political party and the government of the union territory belongs to a different political party, this might result in clashes, wherein the governor, who is a central appointee, will interfere with all the legislations that are introduced by the union territories government, which might result in lot of interference and at the worst dispute between center and UTs, as has been seen in the case of Delhi and recently Puducherry. Now during the conflict between the Delhi government and the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, the Supreme Court ruled in National Capital Territory of Delhi versus Union of India 2019 case that administrators should not misuse the power and frustrate the functioning of the elected government in the territories, and it should put its power to use only after all the methods have failed to reach reconciliation with respect to the differences between his views and those of the Council of Ministers. Illustrating these concerns, author eventually concludes that it is because of these reasons and the excessive power that has been vested in the centre that the union territories with legislature will have difficulty in working effectively with the central government. And hence in this regard he suggests appropriate measures must be undertaken to overcome this situation. So with this we come to the end of this article. Let's move on to the next article. Now the next article appears on the page number 1 of the Hindu newspaper, and it has been titled as Puducherry Cabinet Gives Nod for President Rule. Now this article is in continuation with the discussion on the previous article, wherein we talked about the challenges with respect to the structure of the union territories with legislature. Now Puducherry is a union territory with legislature in whose regard that editorial was discussed. Now let us look into the concept of President Rule. Now the Union Cabinet has approved a proposal to dissolve the Puducherry Assembly after it failed to invoke vote of confidence in the Legislative Assembly of the Union Territory. Now as we hear the topic of President Rule, there is one article that comes in our mind, that is Article 356. However, there is need to be extremely careful here, for Article 356 is only applicable for states and not for union territory such as Puducherry or Delhi. Now for the union territory of Puducherry, the provision for introduction of President Rule has been made under Section 51 of Government of Union Territory Act 1963. That has been introduced as per the provision of Article 239 of the Constitution of India. Further, for the National Capital Territory of Delhi, the constitutional failure is dealt under the Article 239AB, which was added after the 69th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1991. And thus, the Article 356 that talks about the President Rule only deals with the President Rule in states, with respect to the precedent rule in Union Territory, there are different laws and provisions that come into play. However, the precedent rule as the term and its implication is same in both the case. So now let us see what is precedent rule and let us revise it from the perspective of the prelims examination. Now precedent rule, as we all know, is also known as state emergency or constitutional emergency that can be declared on basis of two main grounds as have been provided under Article 356 and Article 365. But the base for these two articles is provided under another article, that is Article 355. Now it is this article that imposes a duty on the centre to ensure that the government of every state is carried on in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution. Now Article 365 and 356 both derive legitimacy from Article 355 that puts an obligation on the central government to ensure that the state government is functioning as per the provisions of the Constitution. Now Article 356 suggests that if President at any time feel that the government of the state is not functioning as per the provisions of the Constitution, then it can declare or proclaim emergency in the state, giving rise to precedent rule. Diametrically opposite of this is Article 365, which suggests whenever a state fails to comply with any direction that has been given by the centre, it will be lawful on the president to impose precedent rule. Now in the first case, that is Article 356, it is the president who declares emergency in state when he feels that such a situation has arisen. However, with respect to Article 365, it is the state government that fails to comply by the directions that have been given by the centre, and thus again the president can lawfully impose the precedent rule. So now you can clearly see how Article 355 lies at the heart of both of these grounds for imposing emergency on the states. Now at the time of declaration of precedent rule, the president may assume the following powers. That is, all the functions or any function of the government of the state, powers that have been vested in the governor of the state. Further, the president may also assume power to declare the powers of the legislature of the state shall be exercisable only under the authority of the parliament, and at last, president may also suspend in part or in whole the operations of any provision of the constitution relating to any authority of the state. However, there is one power that president cannot assume, that is, president cannot take for himself the powers of the high court of the state. Further, it cannot also suspend in part or in whole the operation of any provision of the constitution related to the high courts under Article 356. Further, with respect to the approval of this emergency, such proclamation must be laid before each house of the parliament, and it must be approved within 2 months by each house by simple majority. This is important from the point of the prelims. Please keep these facts in mind, for they are frequently asked in prelims examination. Further, the tenure for this proclamation shall be enforced for a period of 6 months, beyond which this must be extended at a stretch of 6 months each time with the approval of both the houses. Now, the precedent rule in state can only be declared for a maximum time of 3 years. Now, this is the upper limit for which the precedent rule can be imposed, and 6 months is the minimum limit. Now, let us see what effect does precedent rule have over the state legislature or the state on which it is implemented. Now, the state legislature ceases to function when precedent rule is applied. It is either dissolved completely or is kept under suspended animation. Now it was under the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act that there were certain amendments that were introduced. That is, the Article 356, in order to be carried beyond 1 year, must fulfill two conditions. That is, the proclamation of emergency under Article 352 must be in operation in whole of India or part of a state. Now second, if the Election Commission certifies that the general election to the state legislature on which the emergency has been imposed cannot be held on account of certain difficulties. So clearly, since President rule has been implemented in Puducherry, this topic becomes extremely important from the point of view of prelims of 2021. Since questions related to emergency are frequently asked and are sort of favorite for the examiner. And hence, please make a note of this topic and prepare it thoroughly. Now moving on to the next article. Now this article appearing on the page number 7 of the Hindu newspaper has been titled as Federalism and India's Human Capital. Now this article talks about the correlation between federalism and building of human capital. Now it suggests that there have been studies that have been demonstrating a positive correlation between these two trends. And since this talks about federalism, thus it falls under the mandate of GS paper 2, wherein it falls under the topic of polity as well as social justice. Now in this article, the author talks about how there has been a global shift that has been witnessed with respect to distribution of expenditure and revenues towards sub-national governments, that is local governments or state governments. However, with respect to India, there have been certain concerns that have been raised with respect to decentralization, as its record has not been as good. Now in this article, as we move forward, we discuss the decentralization concerns with respect to the three levels of government that is hurting the human capital formation in terms of adequate nutrition, health and education in India. That is critical for the sustainable growth of country in totality. Now in front of you are the three levels of government. Let us try to see what problem is Indian Federation facing with respect to decentralization at the three levels of the government. First, let us look into the fiscal decentralization, wherein we see what devolution of funds are happening across the three tiers of the government. Now starting with the devolution between center and the state. Now this devolution is guided by the constitutional provisions that devolve funds from center towards the states via two main means of transfer, that is transfer through the terms of grant in aid and through tax devolution. Now while tax devolution are unconditional and have seen impressive growth since the time of 14th Financial Commission that caused them to increase from 32% to 42%, which has further been retained effectively by the 15th Financial Commission, and hence tax devolution are going good. The problem actually lies with respect to the grant in aid that is done in terms of centrally sponsored scheme. Now these grants in aid are conditional and thus they impose conditions with respect to their devolution, thereby creating pressure over the state government. Now over the recent years, the grant in aid have increased vis-a-vis the total transfer that happened between the center and the state to as much as 23% in year 2021-2022. Now if grant in aid account for 23% of total fiscal transfers, then it is a huge concern since these are conditional and form pressure over the state government that are already suffering from lack of funds. Now let us look at the transfer that happens between the state government and the local government. Now, while state governments are suffering at the hands of central government, local governments are actually suffering even worse at the hands of the state government. Now, this is because while the central government has been regularly appointing finance commission as has been mandated under Article 280 of the Indian Constitution, state government have failed to do so. The State Finance Commission that has been mandated under Article 243I of the Indian Constitution has not been implemented or constituted in a regular fashion. And thus, this is one of the greatest challenges that is hampering the financial strength of the local government. Further alongside, there is the issue of capacity building, because of which the poorly empowered local governments have not been able to tap upon its tax resources. In India, the property tax collection is as low as 0.2% of the GDP, while this is as much as 3% in some other nations. Now, property tax has been allocated to the local governments, but they have not been able to tap on the property tax because of various reasons, starting from lack of capacity building to political pressures. And thus, the devolution between state and the local government have been poor, and local government are not at all financially empowered to undertake measures to strengthen human capital in terms of education and health at the grassroots. To address this vertical imbalance, the author here has suggested two solutions. While in order to strengthen the financial capacity of the states, the center must reduce the conditional grants and enhance the unconditional grants. Further, with respect to the empowerment of local government financially, it is mandated by the 15th Financial Commission that states who do not comply with the constitutional provisions pertaining to the State Financial Commission will not receive any grants after the March of 2024. Now, after discussing the concerns related to fiscal decentralization, let us move towards political decentralization in terms of functions that are devolved across the three tiers of the government. Now, with respect to the devolution of functions between center and state, there is the 7th schedule that divides the subject as per which the center and the state government perform their functions. However, over the years, the concurrent list has seemed to be growing in its strength, while the state list is seen to have decreased. For example, in 1976, by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, education was brought from state list to the concurrent list. And thus we can see how the functions in the state list have been decreasing over the years, while the powers with the center in terms of concurrent list has been increasing. Because it is in the concurrent list, it is the center who has the upper hand. Further, with respect to the residuary power, it is only in India where it lies at the disposal of the central government. And these are the concerns with respect to the devolution of functions. And thus the political decentralization continues to remain weak. And thus the centralized nature of India's fiscal and political infrastructure continues to persist, and India continues to face the problem of asymmetric federalism. The solution here lies in effectively bringing the three levels of government and convincing them to effectively devolve the fund, function and functionaries at the lower level of the governments, so as to bring about a complete decentralization that shall be helpful in ensuring India's human capital is enriched in terms of health and education. Now, this article appearing on the page number 13 has been titled as US will seek to rejoin UNHRC, that is United Nations Human Rights Council. Now, this has been in the recent context of the election of new US President, Mr. Joe Biden, who has decided to resume its involvement in the global affairs after the previous Trump administration withdrew US from all the important pacts and organizations. Now, Joe Biden is trying to re-enter the global forum by entering all the important pacts and organizations, and this is one such step. Now, since this organization is important from the perspective of prelims examination, let us try to look into the key points that can be asked. Now, the UN Human Rights Council forms the heart of the global human rights architecture. It has replaced another organization that was named as the UN Human Rights Commission in 2006. Now, this body invites representation from General Assembly of the United Nations and has been headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, UNHRC at present has 47 serving members at any time, with elections that are held to fill this seat every year. Please make a note of this. The elections to UN Human Rights Council is held every year based on the allocation to the region across the world. Furthermore, the important points with respect to the prelims include that this Human Rights Council extends no special privileges for more developed Western nations, as has been seen in case of IMF and World Bank. Further, the countries are disallowed from occupying a seat for more than 2 consecutive terms. Its resolutions are non-binding on human rights issue, which makes this body a little weak. Further, apart from the Council, the UN has also set up a number of treaty-based organizations to monitor the compliance of human rights standards globally. And at last, an important point is that the UNHRC holds session 3 times a year, and these sessions are known as the periodic review, special procedure and special rapporteur. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. Answer for yesterday's DNS question and today's question of the day are displayed on your screen. Please attempt this question and put your answer in the comment section below.